Peace and blessings. Hey, y'all. Okay, hold on. There we go. Hey, y'all. Peace and blessings. Thank you for coming on in. Come on in. Tap that like button on your way in. I appreciate y'all so much. And I hope everybody is having a good day today. Listen, I know this is an impromptu live, but sometimes it be that way and it is what it is. Can y'all put a one in the chat if my audio is coming in good, please? If you can hear me with no issues. Just trying to do a little house cleaning and make sure everything goes smoothly. So we got DT in the building. You got all kind of eyeballs popping out, right? I appreciate you. Okay, thank you. I appreciate y'all. Buddha Man is in the place to be. We got the kitchen closed. Thank y'all for coming on in. I appreciate you. We got ML in the house. Thank you. Thank you. And so I want to give, people an opportunity to come on in. And I actually am also going to drop the link because I think this is a really interesting topic. Not going to draw it out and make it a super long live, but I definitely want to touch on, fathers or parents being stern with their children. Is there a limit to where it can be too extreme? If it can be, too overbearing? If, I believe there are pros and cons to both. I happen to be raised in a household where my father was very strict. My mother was the nurturer that she was, created to be in the form of a mom, a wife, and a woman, right? And so I was fortunate enough and blessed enough to have a balance, though it was confusing at times. I'm not going to even lie to you, especially when they bumped heads and maybe they didn't see eye to eye on certain things. And, whether they discussed it in front of me or they didn't, you can pick up on certain things, right? So I thought that David Banner's, I love David Banner. He's evolved as a man. He keeps evolving. And I know over a period of time, I have definitely learned a lot from him, as others, So I want to touch on it. And so thank you, Complex Design, for coming on through. We got Miss B in the building. We got, hey, 𝘊𝘭𝑥𝘭𝑢𝘆𝑏𝑜𝘭𝑔𝑒. Oh, I like your avatar. You switched it. Okay, all right. Come on in, y'all. Without further ado, for those that tend to, if you're just coming in, you ain't missed nothing. And those that are watching the replay, definitely tap that like button. For any new subscribers that have come on board, I truly appreciate you and thank you for doing so and becoming a part of Miss C𝘰𝘱𝘺𝘺𝘨𝑒's tribe, right? So I appreciate everybody, and we're gonna go on and get right off into it. Now, I do want to preface, the little video clip. It's not long, and of course, he says whatever he says, I deem to be intentional and with purpose and profound, right? In most cases, but I definitely just want to, again, the point being, I don't want to, you're always going to offend somebody one way or the other, but I have my opinions, just like everyone else has their opinions and their ideologies on what the recipe is and could be and maybe should be for raising children. There's an old saying and an old adage that says that we're never given a manual or a handbook when we have children. So nobody gives us clear-cut instructions because there aren't any. Everyone is different. Dynamics are different. Chemistry is different. Upbringing is different. Backgrounds are different. Cultures are often different, especially in, the times that we're living in. It's a lot more acceptable and a lot more of the norm than in the past, right? Maybe 100 years, even 50 years from now. So there's just a lot of different variables to actually look at and to consider. So again, there can be pros and there can be cons. And we're going to discuss them. So without further ado, peace to the chat, peace to the chat. Let's listen to what David Banner has to say. I do want to change the, hold on, y'all. I want to change the speed. Where did it go? There it is. Okay.
But you did have a good relationship with him when he was alive?
Um, 2 years before he died, my father was a disciplinarian. He was the chief of the first cohort of black men in the fire department in Mississippi. So you can imagine what he went through, and you got to spend the night with each other. You feel me? So my dad was very, very stern. I don't think my dad smiled at me until I was 21. Told the story in other places, but I think that it matched here. He said, when I got that big deal with Universal, me and my dad started getting cool. We started hanging out, even drinking a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna tell you how hard my dad is. I got my dad's name tattooed on my arm. I've never said his first name in his presence. I don't even think I said his first name before I got it tattooed on my arm. He was dead. But I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, are we cool now because I got all this money? Or I have all this money? He said, no, I didn't need no fucking friends. He said, my only job was to make sure that you were a man that can navigate himself through this evil world. And if I end up leaving here, that could take care of your mother and your brother.
So let's unpack that for a minute because he definitely covered some different topics. First of all, he made mention that his dad didn't even smile, or he doesn't remember his dad smiling until he was 21 years old. Now, my the information that I have reveals that he raised him as his own son, so he was in his life and has or he's passed on now, but he was in his life for most of his life, so he raised him. That's the only dad he knows. That's the only dad he acknowledges as a father, as dad, right? And yet and still he's never mentioned his name in his presence by name. And then again, he was a grown man before his dad even smiled in his presence, in his recollection, which is the perspective that we're speaking from. Now, I can't imagine because, like, had he not said this, if you look and you watch and you followed David Banner, he always smiles. He has a very inviting smile, a very sincere smile. It's very authentic. And I believe that it's intentional. Now it's habit, but when he first, came onto the scene, in his journey, he was a lot more serious. And I think as, life started lifing and he started getting older and wiser, even says that he had to unlearn and relearn a lot of things because, of course, he was taught a certain set of values that did not necessarily serve him in the best interest of his journey once he became older, more mature, and again, living more life. But there definitely he's making it very, very apparent that he has the utmost respect for his father, whether his father has transitioned, when his father was here, now how he felt as far as, love and all of those intimate details when it comes to the feelings aspect of it. But it didn't take away from the fact that either his father commanded and demanded respect and he gave it out of that, whether he did it based off of him loving his father despite his father not being open when it came to being affectionate with David Banner, or maybe a combination of that and then some others in both, right? So let's just listen a little bit further and see what he has to say.
And he said, now that I know that you can do that, pass the Hennessy. And when my dad became my best friend, like, he was diagnosed with cancer. Like, I hated my dad. Not hate like I wanted him to die, but I didn't like him. But what I found out that was so painful is I was all that he talked about at work. You know, his friends told me that I was all he talked about all the time, and he was proud. He would never let me know that. Show you something, bro. One time, first time I got all A's in high school, I came home and passed this to me, Small. This is my report card, right?
Okay.
My dad came. My dad picked up the newspaper, kept reading. I was still standing there. He said, "What the fuck? You talking about this bullshit?" He said, "This what the fuck you supposed to do." He said, "I don't see no damn fireworks going off when you cut the lights on. I don't see no fucking standing ovation when there's food on the table." He said, "As a man, good is what you supposed to do." And that's why I was telling you earlier, man, like when we talked off camera, why it's hard for me to brag on the God box, because I'm supposed to be fucking dope. Being dope is what you're supposed to do if you selling products, because if it's easy to do, then it's not an art form. And if it's easy to do and your little brother can do it, then why should they buy your shit? But what I realized is if Southerners are not egocentric to a certain degree, that they'll pass us up. They tried to pass the West Coast over until they start stomping on buildings. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like you have to adopt the way that white folks act in order for even our own people to respect you.
Listen. Listen. So hold on, y'all. Okay, so listen, that's powerful, right? And this is when I started to okay, I remind myself, you are not a man, you are a woman. Not that I really have to, but when you internalize and you receive certain information that doesn't necessarily resonate with you, like for me, I gotta pause and I gotta okay, I gotta explain it to myself. I gotta talk it through. I gotta walk it out. Now, I remember bringing straight A's home, and as it became more of a routine for me, an occasional B, maybe a C, once I think a couple C's in high school, and I was devastated. My parents, my dad had the expectation that this is you honor roll. You don't have nothing else to do. You ain't got no other worries but your education. Don't bring no grades up in here that's reflecting that you distracted. Don't bring no grades up in here and you ain't said lower than a B, preferably an A. If you need help in a class and it doesn't come easy to you and you don't say nothing, so we can, get you a tutor or do whatever we need to do in order to get to the point to where you are meeting the expectation of this household. So I relate, and I can definitely relate to David Banner on that, though my father was not as curt with me as I probably would have been mortified. I'd have been like, well, to hell with that. Then what am I doing this for? If I'm not doing it for some type of self-gratification, pleasing of my father, because I was definitely and still am a daddy's girl. So what is my motivation, basically, right? And then as he states, his dad gave him a different perspective. Oh, let me go back up. I'm sorry, I was playing the video, but thank you so much for the super chat, Berg. We appreciate you, Birch. I want to get it right. I don't want to mispronounce. Salute, Mr. Kimmy Mods in chat. Thank you so much for the blessing. I appreciate you. And thank you for blessing the platform. And thank you for being here. Appreciate your presence. Definitely loving this topic, right? So, he's like, look, he's like, you don't get no celebration, and I don't get no kudos anytime you walk into a room and flick on a light or turn on a stove, or basically having access to the amenities that, you can look at all of it as being exceptional. You can look at all of it as being through life through the lens where you can look at it as being this is what is expected of you automatically. This is what you're supposed to do. Right. And so now I keep going back, and this is just me. I keep going back to the title when he says my dad didn't smile at me until I was 21. But he just said that he found out, and if I am correct, once his dad transitioned and he passed on, that's when he found out that was all his dad talked about, that he was much more endeared with David Banner, not in his presence, than in his presence. Now, I don't know how to feel about that. I'm going to keep it a buck, because it's like once you're gone, and I got to find out through other people how you truly felt about me, because based off of the delivery that David Banner says that his dad gave him, he might have found it difficult to believe that his dad, that he looked at his sternness as a form of a love language, as a form of love. He cared more about preparing him. But in your formative years, whether you're a male or a female, a lot of times we look at things on the surface and from face value, right? And so if his dad was delivering it that way, now he did say he was a chief of a fire department. So I actually was good friends with chief of a fire department some years back. So I understand. I get it. I definitely can relate to the mindset of a true leader, of somebody that has a lot of responsibility, that the expectations are endless for people in certain positions and certain, statures in life. So there's so many different variables and so many different things that can be mentioned that could contribute to how did we get here, and how can people benefit and make it applicable to their situation, and not not absorb so much of the negative, right, as opposed to the positive. Takes chewing the meat and spitting out the bones is how I often hear it, right? So definitely but again, it's like, okay, so David Banner, through his own words, is saying that he was totally unaware and oblivious to his father absolutely having the respect, the love, the admiration, and being proud of him. But it wasn't directly to David Banner. So is there a cliff in this topic? Is there such a thing as going too far? Is there such a thing as maybe overdoing it, even though your intentions were good? Because now, who knows why I don't live his life, don't know him, outside of what he tells us, right? And so one thing that I am familiar with is that David Banner developed a substance problem or an alcohol problem for some years. He's recovered, he's elevated, grown, and outgrown that addiction. However, it had gotten really severe. So it just pauses the question, if we don't get that love and that substance from our life givers, or the ones that nurture us and raise us and instill foundational principles into our lives, then how do we know what to expect going out into the expanded world, right? Where people don't have any of those things invested in us. So, I found this to be fascinating, interesting, and it evokes like all kind of responses for me. Like I can see the value, absolute value in it. And then I can see how it could have been misconstrued as something totally different, because his dad was super intentional about not babying him, about not coddling him. And what that looks like for him and the dynamic of their relationship, it's not going to look the same to everybody else. He's going to interpret that based off of his life's experiences, what he was taught, what he wasn't taught, what he felt he failed at, what he excelled at. All of these different characteristics played a part. But one thing is for sure, is that was his way of displaying that he was super invested and he loved him, even if David Banner did not know it at the time to the degree at the time. Could it have changed his mindset? But I will say this, evidently for David Banner to be who he is today and to be in his own right, whether he sought out that purpose or not, he's a leader, has leadership qualities, very assured. Those things had to have come from his dad. So basically, does the good outweigh the bad at this point? And where do we go from here? And how can we take some jewels and some gems and apply them to our own personal situations, if we do it all? Let's continue, y'all. Salute to the chat. Salute to everybody coming in. Hey, Salaya Ben y'all. Thank you. Good to see you. Appreciate you putting that disclaimer up there. Peace and blessings to everybody. We got CC in the building. We got the beautiful Miss Pretty Brown Eyes in the building. We got Tajaka in the building. Oh, it's so good to see every last one of y'all. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for being accessible in such short notice with this stream, but we are here nonetheless. Let's continue, y'all.
So like the only reason why I let people know that the God Box is one of the best albums ever, not just my best album, because if I don't, you're gonna act like that shit didn't happen at all. You feel what I'm saying? So, you know, and I saw that, man, when I did the hip hop cipher with BET. You know, one of the staff members at BET said that, you know, there was a conversation that was being held that David Banner had one of the best hip hop cipher verses ever. And the world act like they didn't, like it was like a roach in the room. Me and Crit I had a joke. I was telling Crit this joke. I said, they try to treat us like San Antonio. When the San Antonio Spurs win the championship, Sports Illustrated run their shit for 2 days. If it's anybody else, it's through the whole month. You can get a t-shirt here. You can get this, you know, it's the titties on the cover or whatever. You feel me? But I'm not gonna let them chump this off. So
I just want to throw in this footnote. I remember when the God Box came out. I remember the marketing. He did all of his own marketing. He did all of his own production. He was hands-on with the entire process, the presentation, the boxing of it, the launching, the networking, having a bunch of people that was either on his team or connected with him. It was so personal to him. And every time I saw him launch it or, you know, promote it, because it was in the works and he promoted it throughout the entire, once he got the name of it and had the vision set, he was promoting it. So I remember it being promoted almost, I think maybe 8 months to maybe about 10 months before it was ever released, right? One thing that I can remember that he used to always reiterate and repeat was that this is going to be the best album ever. Out of all the albums, out of all of the artists, out of all of the releases, out of all of the people that, you know, like I said, he promoted and produced and managed his own product. So he didn't have the big record companies behind him on this project. This was something, and for him to have the assurance enough to say that this is going to be and every time he said it, you believed him. You absolutely believed him, right? Exactly, 𝘍𝘭𝘥𝘭𝘢. He certainly used it to help build a strong man out of his son, but also we all have trials. I agree with that 100%. And so he's saying, you know, he found a recipe for him to iterate and to live by, that this is what I'm supposed to do, but I'm the best at whatever I choose to do. Again, qualities that he says was instilled by his father, and he's going to explain that a little bit more. Let's keep it pushing. Come on, y'all. It's not long, but this is a clip where everything he says is super powerful and impactful. And even if we don't use this in one aspect, these are still gems. That's what I love about wisdom, is that you can apply it to any type of different avenue of your life, of your relationships, apply it to certain circumstances that may not have anything to do with the source of how you learned it or received it in the first place, right? So yes. Hey, Selena, thank you for coming through, sis. I appreciate y'all. Thank you. Thank you. Let's go, y'all. Let's go.
So, my dad taught me a valuable lesson, but in this case, we won't go down in history unless we fight for our culture.
Now, you said your dad was a disciplinarian. So was it a two-parent household?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because the way you talked about him is almost like they were separated.
No, it's just that, I'm gonna tell you what, I'm gonna be very honest with you. Now that I'm older, because I used to always say, mom, my mama's boy. But my dad used to always tell me, you keep laying up under your mama, you're gonna be weak. And
y'all, I'm sorry. Listen, mark this down. This is coming from me. There's a lot of truth to that. I won't say it's all true and it's always true, because everybody is so dynamically different. But overall, if you look at it from a cultural standpoint, you look at it from a where we are standpoint, and you look at the percentage of single moms raising sons without the fathers in the home, and we talk about this all the time, the generations are getting weaker. And I mean male and female, but just for the sake of conversation, we are speaking on the male aspect. And I'm telling you, when he said that, it resonated with me. It was a harsh truth, because as much as single moms, we want to raise our boys to be sons, we weren't created for that role. We were not equipped to be able to do that. And boys don't respond to male energy like female energy, especially when that female energy has birthed that son, right? There is a bond, an interconnected bond that is often unspoken and undeniable. It just goes with the territory of combining. You got the same blood running through your children or your sons as you do the mothers. So it's going to be a whole different dynamic. But he's absolutely right. And he said that he was at some point a self-proclaimed mama's boy. So for him to say that, and then to basically say what I had to unlearn and relearn, but it also reiterates when I said a little bit earlier, I see how it can be a little confusing. I really do. When you have such a hyper different dynamic of a male energy and a female energy. So it seems as if they had definitely differences in beliefs on how to raise children. And it may have been totally unintentional, because his mom was just being his mom. She was in her essence. She was in her role naturally. And then his dad was in his naturally, right? But because David Banner is a male and his dad is a male, they're going to be able to interact, communicate, and relate more effectively, especially in his older years developing into manhood. So I just wanted to say that, because that is super important. It irritates me. And there was a time where when my oldest son was younger, I thought that I could do it by myself. I ain't gonna even hold you. So I get it from both sides. But let me tell you, life showed me totally different. And so when I had my second son, I was more equipped and more aware, and I didn't believe the same. And so it changed how I interacted, and especially in different age levels, because it's cool to baby your kids when they're little for a little while. They're going to know that you love them. There are different love languages, right? However, you can actually set them up for failure, and even worse if you don't relinquish that and understand that they're no longer going to be babies at some point, and you're going to have to release them into the world. That's why you got a lot of these grown ass men that are still, they don't know how to get off the mama's titty. And that's just, it is what it is. You know, I watch a lot of videos, it just fascinates me how people like the arrest videos, like cops, they arrest people in different scenarios. But I don't care if they're stealing cars, if they're stealing stuff out of Walmart, if it's a domestic situation, if it's an eviction situation. A lot of them all have one thing in common. A lot of them call for their mamas. Okay, you got 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds. I want to call, they don't talk about calling their attorneys as much as they talk about calling their mamas. So, you know, definitely there was some foresight, some wisdom, and a level of understanding that at that time DB didn't even receive or was aware of the lesson, or the type of rearing that his dad, he didn't understand it. He misconstrued it as, he don't love me, but he's so strict that he stifles me, especially when you start getting into them teenage years. Okay, can't tell them nothing, couldn't tell me nothing, so I know, like I know who I know, what I know, and now you looking sideways, right? So anyway, let's continue, y'all.
You know, I literally had to relearn all the stuff that he was trying to tell me. Like, it was easier to run to my mom. My mother is who honed and supported my artistic side, but the stuff that people like about David Banner, the way that I hold myself, my ethics, what I stand for, that's my dad.
Boom. Boom. He said, I learned my artistic side from my mother, but the things that people like about me, the mental toughness, the respect for structure and authority, the drive to succeed and prove myself, that came from my dad. That came from dad. Okay. So definitely, as he said, he had to unlearn and relearn. Unlearn and relearn. Most of us at some points, plural, points with an S in our lives, have to unlearn and relearn. That's what they call life. Adjusting, making realizations, coming to realizations. People, in my opinion, learn until they take their last breath. There's always something you can wake up and learn on that particular day. But he said, I had to unlearn and relearn that though my mother gave me what she was supposed to give me, what she could give me, and what she gave me that she felt would facilitate good in my life, that would instill some things that were going to be beneficial to me, the stuff, the meat and potatoes of who I became, came from my dad.
That's, as a matter of fact, he's actually not my blood father, but I call the other dude the donor. I never seen him before.
Oh,
That's why. So everybody who think like that is my real father, as far as I'm concerned. But my mom says that I act more like him than his blood son does, and that they said if you feed him long enough, they start looking like him. And people who look at me and him together think that that's like my blood father, but I wouldn't call him anything else. That's why I tattooed his name. Like, that is my father, 𝘰𝘺.
now Father's Day is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
When that comes around, and obviously your father has passed on, what happens on a day like that?
Don't bother me. My father told me before he died, he was at peace with what he had done and how he had lived his life. And as a matter of fact, I had become friends with one of the top surgeons, maybe on this earth. And he was going to do a special trial. You know, he said he was willing to take on my father's case. And my dad said he didn't even want it. He said he was accepted his fate and he cool with it. So he didn't raise me like that. My dad didn't raise me to be all emotional. And, you know.
That's important. That's important. And I think that that is probably one of the keys to why he was able to receive the way that his dad decided to interact with him, raise him, or lack thereof, was because he did not lead with emotion, and he definitely separated the two. We're not going to mix emotion with becoming a man. These are things that foundational principles, even though my delivery may be what it is, you, my son, you should be able to see through that. You should be able to pick up what I'm putting down. Chew the meat, spit out the bones. My delivery ain't gonna always be perfect, but look past my delivery and can you peep the message? If a man or a woman is intentional on a consistent basis about life, about how they speak, what they say, the decisions they make, how calculative they are, if they're planners, if you can bank on the words coming out of their mouths to be true, to be just, those different qualities typically will shine through a person's delivery if it's consistently delivered that way. That was just his dad's way. It was his way of interacting. Unfortunately, there are a lot of younger, or not even younger, just a lot of men or males out here that would not have received it the way, or it wouldn't necessarily have converted into the wisdom that he intended for David Banner to get, right? So David got the memo, he got the message. Even if it was after his dad passed on a larger scale, it came evidently when it was supposed to, is what I'm saying. But we have to understand that there are different ways that people express love, and it's not always goo goo gaga, hugs, kisses, reaffirmations, giving them trophies just because they participated. These are things that are expected out of you in life. How are you going to respond? How are you going to deal with it? Are you going to respond based off of the emotion as opposed to logic? Right? And so when his dad separated the emotion or just totally dispelled it altogether, he thought it was powerful enough to do that, to the point where, again, David Banner's words is that my dad didn't smile in my presence at me until I was 21 years old. 21 years old. And yet and still, David Banner has one of the most beautiful smiles, and consistent. He's always smiling. It's like a trademark of his. It's an identifying characteristic of his. So for him to be able to delve into that portion that he wasn't initially taught from a man that he did nothing but love and respect, man, that says something. Let's go.
He lives with me. And this is what I tell people, how you know you have a good parent. When you hear their voice in your head and long gone, I can give you this example. My dad used to watch me do something like walk over a piece of paper on the ground, right? And he'll wait to the 13th time. He would be like, hey, motherfucker, didn't you see that paper on the ground? It took you more effort to step over the paper 13 motherfucking times than it did to pick it up that one time and it be over with. My dad would do stuff like, he would make me mow the yard, and he would come outside and he was like, how long does it take for you to mow this yard? I say 2 hours. I'd be mad as shit, but not so here, because my dad could, before he caught cancer, before he contracted cancer, my father could press with his feet 800 pounds. And I'm gonna tell you something else about him, but he said, how long does it take you to mow the yard? I said, 2 hours. He said, how long does it take me? I said, an hour. He said, why you out here fighting to fucking work? Go ahead and get it done. You could have been gone and done whatever you want to. Just do the work. And I hear him to this day when I step over a piece of paper, or when I'm mad about something that ain't my fault. Well, it don't matter if it's your fault or not. It's your business. Get it done. So I think about my dad every day. That's why I tattooed his name on. I said, what arm do I look at the most? And for some reason, I think I was supposed to naturally have been left-handed. My mom is left-handed. So usually when I wake up, I look to my left side. So I never forget him. I think about him every day. So Father's Day is not a very special day to me because I think about him every day in my life.
Or an emotional one?
Because his dad, he loved his dad every day. He had such a high respect and high regard for his dad that, again, and he said this several times during this clip, that I never, ever even mentioned his name in his presence. But yet and still, he's got his name tattooed on his arm. And he even was so intentional and forthcoming to say that when I was going to decide which arm I was going to put the tattoo on, it was the one that I looked at the most. And because my mother is left-handed, and I think I should have been left-handed, I favored my left arm. So that was the arm that his name went on. Now, this is an adult man that went through all of those steps to articulate how he felt about his dad and how much respect he had for his father, or has for his father. I know his father's transitioned. We're almost done with this. Let's go.
Yeah. Or an emotional one. Or if not every day of my life, when I look at my arm.
It's almost like an analogy of a hit record. When you can turn a record off, in my opinion, and the record still is in your head.
Still reverberating in your head.
A year, 2 years, 5, 10 years from now, a timeless hit record.
Uh-oh, my
That's how you know a
bad,
hit
y'all.
record. It's almost like an analogy of you still hear your father's voice, right?
Look at that smile. Look at that smile. It's just like a knee-jerk reaction for him. It's automatic. That's how you know he's found peace. Like I've seen in the chat, he's been spiritually awakened. And I'm telling you, it will change your appearance, your entire appearance from the inside out. Inside has to be addressed first. But we all, I was talking to my son this past week, and we were having like a really heart-to-heart conversation. And he said, Ma, he said, sometimes I feel like there's so much dysfunction in the world. I said, it is. I said, every family, because sometimes he'll go around his little friends, his little homies or whatever, and their home life would look a little different. And then he'll mill it around in his head for a bit. And then he'll come to me and he'll ask like little questions that maybe he doesn't have the answers to, trying to formulate an opinion or the right answer in his head, if that makes any sense. But my point in saying this is that I let him know, I said, honey, there's a level of dysfunction in every family. This world and the times that we're living in encapsulates a large amount of dysfunction. So we have to be aware of that. Now, with that being said, God is God at the end of the day. God is still over all at the end of the day. And this is a prime example, and I can relate to this, that when your relationship with God increases and strengthens, there's a level of peace, of happiness, of serenity, and of calmness that absolutely emits from God through us to everything that we touch and everyone that we are around. That's my personal testimony. That is not my opinion.
Good father. Now, what's one thing your dad did for you that you will never forget?
One thing my dad did for me that I never forget. I don't know how positive it is.
Oh, gosh.
I don't know how positive it is, but my father had a thing where I knew that if he would always, and it would make me mad, he would always hit me in my head and say, think. And I used to think he was being so mean because he would always touch my head. And as you growing up, you get 16, you start feeling yourself like, why is this dude touching me? But now that I practice meditation, you can think yourself out of any situation. And whenever you get angry, that means that you want to become carnal and release your ability to think. Stay stay intact. Think. I don't care how many I don't care what you do. I don't care whether you fight, jump off the building, but make a sound choice. Think. So even when I want to get mad now and do certain things, I'm not saying that I won't do it, but I thought, okay, how long is it gonna take me to get out of jail? How much are people gonna sue me? You know, I think the whole movie out now, and that comes from my father. I feel him saying, "Think, son, think." You know what I mean? And I think that helps me more than just about anything on this earth.
That did exactly what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to leave an impression. He was supposed to get it. He was supposed to digest it, and it was supposed to become a part of him, to where also I take that as him cementing a separation between thinking and logic and how he feels, where his emotional standpoint is. Okay, so there are definitely, like we talked about, pros and cons when it comes to, you know, having a very stern parent that is non-affectionate, that is closed off to the point where it's hard to read. Does this parent really love me? When in a lot, as long as they're not being abusive and they're not crossing that line or that fine line, you can construe it as a love language. That is how they either were taught or that is what they learned in how to communicate, right? So when you're talking about, let's cover real quickly the cons, right? So we're talking about difficulty with emotional expression. So when you don't receive it, it's hard to express it to somebody else because you don't know what you don't know. Not only are we taught that something exists, but we're taught how to make it manifest, how to make it work. There's a process in it. There's a system in it, right? So if it's never been shown to us or demonstrated to us, then how would we know how to, or what the norm is, or what the majority, how they interact with people? And so it becomes foreign to us when all of a sudden we grow into our own, we get out into what they call the real world, and you got people walking up to you and just want to hug you, and you don't do hugs. You ain't never really came from no home where you've been indulged with a whole bunch of physical affection or reaffirmations. There's just a lot of different things that you don't get from a stern parent, because a lot of times if a parent is super stern, it's not going to, they're going to make sure that you get the message. Therefore, it will cement, and in their mind, it will reverberate deeper if they withdraw or they don't mix affection with that. So yeah, I'm not here to love you. I'm here to raise you. I'm here to prepare you for the real world. That's how I show you I love you. That my love language is not communicating the goo goo gaga stuff and trying to make you feel better because you know, if you in a slump or you walking around talking about you depressed or you broke up with your little girlfriend, this and that and the other. The fact of the matter is that this is what it's going to require for you to make it out here in this real world. The only other thing that I want to mention, because we could go on and on based off of perspective and how you looking through this and the lens that you're looking at it through, is strained parent and children connection. And it was very apparent that with David Banner, there was an estrangement, even though he loved and respected him. Unbeknownst to him, he did not know how his dad really felt about him. Not young anyway, not in the midst of it all, right? Like he said, he used to beat on his head and tell him to think. I know most people would be offended if a parent did that, especially maybe out in public, or they did it repetitively as a form of, you know, scolding you or correcting, you know, you. It can definitely be received in a different way other than kind. Okay, so when it comes to the vulnerability of a child or a son and a parent, again, for the conversation, we're speaking of sons, of the son and the parent relationship, it can definitely be received in a way that strains the relationship, that definitely causes somewhat of a disconnect, right? So a lack of affection can create emotional distance, which definitely affects communication. So now, will that, even though that son respects you, will he feel comfortable in coming to you with critical decisions, with certain situations, without feeling like he's going to be judged, right? So anyway, I dropped the link. I got a few more minutes, but speaking of sons, I got to go get mine. So I got a few moments, and I see Complex Design in the back. Hey, greetings to you. Thank you for coming up. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. What you got on the topic?
You know, it's funny that you bring this up. Um, I'm the son of a correctional lieutenant and counselor. So my dad was he was in the Department of Corrections, California, the CDC,
Mm-hmm.
California Department of Corrections, basically of my whole life until he medically retired. He had an aneurysm on the job and had to retire. My dad was also a Vietnam vet. Okay. So,
Oh
in the
boy.
latter years, in the latter years, there was a lot of PTSD stuff that he ended up having to deal with. And he didn't even know that he had it. Like that's how bad. I don't want to say bad, but that's kind of some of the things that undergird and underlie maybe say a lot of black men who have sons, right? And there's the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that they've gone through, and then there's what they know to pass on to their sons to make sure that they're properly hardened to deal with society, right? I
Yes.
never took it, when I got to the age that I got to, I think maybe it was like maybe in my early 30s, like kind of like my late 20s, early 30s, when I got my first successful business off the ground. My dad didn't really approve of me not going to college and eschewing all of that, right? And taking the entrepreneurial route. But
Mm-hmm.
when I showed and proved what I could actually do, then all that fell by the wayside. And then he basically said, you know what, you got it, man, you got it. From there, we
Mm-hmm.
have been nothing but cool ever since. You know what I mean? And I think what it is that you just want to make sure that your sons are going to be all right. And so
Yes.
instead of other people, beating them down and doing all that, you do it in a way where it's like, look, I'm doing this from a place of love. I need to make sure that you can get out here and handle the world. And
Exactly.
that's not something, I don't think a lot of people understand, like from a father to a son, what love looks like.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of don't get it. You know
Right.
what I mean? It's not the love that you get from your father when you're a son. It's not going to be the same that you get from your mom. However, you know how black culture in America here is largely structured, right? Where it's how do I say this? I don't want to say this, but I'm not trying. I just want to get it out properly. Um, a mother's love is to be more revered than a father's, right? Because we're always taught that, fathers ain't around, men ain't this, men are not needed. All of these things you hear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when a father actually does the right thing, a lot of times the fathers get chastised for it. I think that actor just a few weeks ago, he talked about masculinity and his sons and stuff like that. And people were, what was the name? Anthony Mackie. And people were critical of him. It's crazy, you know? So
Definitely.
in a lot of ways, being a father is a bit of a thankless task, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not appreciated what it is in terms of the sacrifices that men do specifically for their sons. And that's if they're literally the type of men that are there to rear them and raise them right. You're gonna get tough love if your father's doing it correctly. That's just That's just what comes along with it.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And I think a lot of, because it's not the norm culturally anymore or at this
Hmm.
time in history,
Hmm.
um, and we're dealing with so many people that are, they look through life from an emotional place, that they
Right.
look at it. That's why abuse um, has been, in my opinion, the definition has been redone of abuse. It's like, okay, so does that mean that he doesn't love me because he corrects me? Why do you think so many people have issues with taking any accountability? Not just a little bit, but any at all.
Any.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
any. And so I think, again, we're not going to talk about and go down that, because we could do this for days. And speaking on the balance needed in a household, it's just not a lot of people's reality, where they have mom and dad that are pretty much on the same accord, understanding their roles, understanding
Hmm.
what roles they have in rearing their children, and being as a cohesive unit for the best welfare of the children. But definitely, I agree
Right.
with you that fathers, being a father definitely seems like it's more of a thankless job now than when it was overall the norm, and it was understood that that was the way it was, whether, no matter how you interpreted it, thank me later, basically.
That's that's essentially what it is. And a lot of dudes, when they get older, and then let's just say they have like their first child and stuff like that, all of a sudden they start to understand what their dads went through, right? And
Exactly.
so there's a level of appreciation that men will have for their fathers as they get older, right?
Mhm.
Like when you're younger, you sometimes you're not really trying to hear what they got to say, right?
Yes.
I wasn't necessarily, yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, when it came time for me to kind of get out into the world after I graduated high school, it was go to college and all that other stuff, and I had other ideas. And so
Mhm.
my dad was on some like, oh, you got other ideas, huh? Okay, well then you go ahead and handle it then. And you know what I did? I went and did it,
Yes, exactly.
right? I went and did it, and then I got right back in his face, and he was just like, okay, all right, and he respected it, right? And see, to me, what I had learned was is that okay, look, you got me to this point here, but you know, if I go out here and I make decisions based on what everybody else tells me and it doesn't work out, I can't blame you, right? I can't blame you.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Even if you told me, hey, you should do this, you should do this, you should do that. If it doesn't work out, you're gonna be like, hey, well, look, you didn't have to do what I was, suggesting that you do. So what I
Yes.
went ahead and just did was, well, let me just go ahead and get that knocked out the frame right now. So
Mhm.
anything that I do, I'll eat it, I'll own it.
That's right.
The successes, the failures, everything. And he respected the shit out of that,
That
right? He sees
accountability.
me,
That's because you
yeah,
were
he sees
accountable.
me. Well, here's the thing. I remember times when I get up in the morning and my dad wasn't home from work because there were prison riots that had happened, right? So I get up and
Mhm.
then I'm like, oh crap, man, and he's the one that has to oversee the whole situation. So after they break the melee up and put people in holding and all this, and then he's got to write reports for all this type of stuff. And I used to see what it was that he was responsible for. And so in no way, shape, or form was I trying to add to that when he came home by being like a badass out,
Mhm.
just out in public and stuff like that. I had way more respect for him. But it's like you get into that period of time when you start to formulate your own ideas as a man, and you go about doing so. And you know what? Look, they may or may not agree with 100% with what you're doing, but they'll see their tutelage and their teaching in the things that you do ultimately. So I may
Exactly.
not have been the dude. I may not have been the guy to go and work for the state and do all that. I decided to go the entrepreneur route, but he's seen it pay off. So he's just like, you know what? I can leave here and say I'm proud of you, and that's all I ever wanted.
I think that's mostly all any fathers want is to,
Exactly.
and
Yep.
that's what David Banner was also saying when he spoke, that when his dad, he had a relationship with one of the top surgeons he felt was in the world to help his dad in his cancer journey, and his dad said, "No, I'm good. I'm at peace." And
Mhm.
a lot of that I'm sure was attributed to all of his children. If he had multiple children, and I'm aware he did, he was good with making sure that they knew how to navigate in this world before.
Yeah.
It was like his
Yep.
permission. His job was well done here, so now I can go in peace.
Yeah. It's I'll tell you, just being a father myself. Now I have a daughter, so that's a whole other conversation. Like I don't
Yeah.
have a son, I have a daughter, but it really is, and I don't, for people that are listening, like, fatherhood is literally a thankless task. You
Yes.
don't get much for Father's Day. People don't really revere Father's Day as they do Mother's Day, and it's just a part. It's just a part of what comes with being a man, right?
Mhm.
So there's not going to be the fanfare. There's not going to be all the, the heartwarming, touching moments and all that kind of shit. It ain't. It just
And
isn't.
neither is real life.
Well, there's that part, right?
Neither
We
is
don't want to,
real.
I mean, because look, you don't want to walk around with like false impressions of how things, quote unquote, should be, right?
Mhm.
Your dad teaches you, yeah, there's what's ideal and then there's what is,
Correct. That's right.
right?
It's
There's
what
what's
you want it
ideal
to
and then
look
there's what
like
is.
and what real life
Yeah.
really looks
And
like.
then there's
Yes.
what it is.
Yes.
You better off dealing with what is.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you this before, because you've added so much great perspective on the topic, and I'm so glad that you came up and spoke from a man's position. Now, one of the things that crossed my mind was one of the cons that I would have been concerned about would be low self-worth, or the constant need for validation. Like if children aren't getting at the time or in the period of life where they needed the nurturing, that foundation instilled in them, that you are loved, that you have a safe space, even if it's just for a period in your life, at least you know what that feels like. How do you believe that without emotional warmth, a child may internalize the belief that they're not good enough?
I think it's different between son and daughter, right? When you're a
Mhm.
father, so when you have a daughter, you have to approach it a different way.
Mhm.
When you have a son, it's got to come from a I don't want to say a cold place. It doesn't have to come from a cold place, but you have to set expectations for him. Like my dad he's always said this. He's always said this to me my whole life. He'll just tell you, he said, man, the world is not a nice place.
Right.
I swear to God, he's probably said that to me thousands of times. If I had to really think about it, going back to when I was a kid, he'd tell me when I was young, man, listen, let me tell you something, man, the world is not a nice place. And he would say that because my dad literally dealt with PTSD, like killing people in Vietnam. Like there's stories that he's told me, right? And he was put in situations where it was kill or be killed. He's like, dude, this is not a nice place.
Mhm.
So it comes from a different place when you're trying to prepare your son for this.
Correct.
When you have a daughter, it's a bit different. I'm not trying to like turn my daughter into like the next SEAL Team 6 soldier or some shit. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
my daughter's extremely girly. She likes to cook and all that kind of stuff, right? See, so I pour into her based on who she is and who she is not a boy. If I had a son, though, trust and believe, I would be putting him in something that challenges him. And I would be like, listen, no. Now is not the time for you to start crying and shit. I would do that. Because that's what boys need. You if you baby them and you give them the motherly type love, you see what it produces, right?
Yes. Yep.
Well, there you go.
That's it. Well, I'm glad it came from you. It just sometimes things just resonate differently. But
yeah, you said it, not me.
No, I'm saying like it gives it credence, and it definitely it's more it's easily digestible when it comes from somebody that knows from experience, as opposed to what they think should be happening, or what they were taught, as opposed to being the facilitator or being in the position to actually experience that kind of situation. So like I always say, we're the moms for a reason, but our jobs are limited when it comes to rearing children, but particularly for the sake of conversation, boys. Definitely.
Right.
I totally am convicted in that. I believe that. I've lived it, and I've seen the outcomes of different levels of interaction and interference, because moms can get to a point where they are absolutely interfering, as opposed to knowing when to take a step back and allow, the sons to find some things out, make their own mistakes, and discover their own temperament for certain types of relationships. And how can we know if the things that we have instilled in our children work or not, if we don't give them a chance to have some independent thinking or make independent decisions, right or wrong or indifferent? How will you know your children if you don't give them some freedom to be able to do that?
Yeah, it's a fine line. It's a fine line to walk. Because I don't really complain too much about my upbringing, because like nothing's perfect, right? Nothing's perfect. And I don't know what it was about me, but I just fresh out of high school, I was 17. It was just like, all right, man, I'm out here, right? And so it was just sort of like a learn by doing type of thing, because at the end of the day, I'm going to have to be responsible for myself. Right. And, so, you do things. So for example, like when I grew up, there were things that my parents did, and I was just like, I won't do that when I have kids. And I meant it, because it was just sort of like, because I think for how the world is going to be when I come of age to have children, they're going to require something different from me as a parent than what I required from my parents. So it's going to take a slightly different approach. We didn't have social media and all this stuff. Yeah, as a Gen Xer, we didn't have this stuff.
Changed a lot, didn't it?
It changed, yeah. So the kids require something different now. So my approach with my child isn't going to be like how it was with my parents. It's just not, because the time is different. So it's going to require something different.
Yes, correct. Well, you have definitely given some enlightenment, and I appreciate your perspective on coming from a son standpoint, a father standpoint, a man standpoint. All of that is absolutely relevant. And like I said, it gives more credence coming from someone that can relate in all of those different aspects based off of the topic. And shout out to you. Shout out to your dad. Our parents do the best that they can with what they've been given, and they have their own experiences and life before we, the children are born and created. So, that's where grace comes in. That's where the ability to be able to say, okay, I'm going to take what is applicable and that will add value to my life, and instead of judging, just discard the rest. And if nothing else, I can learn what not to do and not how to be in some aspects. We also learn those values from our parents as well. So I would love to stay, but my phone is blowing up. And
No,
yeah,
you got a son to pick up. Go ahead and do that. I just wanted to
yes,
come up
I
here.
do. So I appreciate you, and thank you so much for coming up, Complex Designs. Always.
No problem. No problem.
All
Thank you
right.
for having me again. I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
My pleasure. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. So yeah, y'all, I appreciate y'all. Thank you so much for coming through. I wish it could be a little bit longer, but then again, I think the points have been made, and I don't want to be too long-winded, because sometimes people get tired of you. So I like to be missed every now and again. Right? So I appreciate everybody. Thank you to my chat. Thank you to my super chat. I appreciate everything, the participation in the chat, people being present, just coming through and tapping the like button. I'm grateful for it all. So with that being said, I will see y'all soon. Thank you so much for coming through. And if I missed anything, charge it to my head and not my heart. So I'm out, y'all. Peace.